Yep. Great.
Okay,
Great.
thank you. All right, excellent. Okay. Now this is very exciting. So welcome everybody. Before I get started in terms of introducing our speakers, I just would like to first acknowledge that I'm joining you from the unceded land of the Gadigal people, on which the University of Sydney is located. And this is where I'm zooming from the Sydney University main campus. I would like to show my respects and acknowledge that the Gadigal people are the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm joining you, and to pay my respects to elders past and present. And I welcome you all to, I guess, note in the chat the land on which you are joining this meeting today. So welcome everybody to the first of the physical activity seminar series. This series is presented by the SPARTAN network, the Faculty Sport and Physical Activity Research and Teaching Network. It's an MH network that is designed to bring together researchers and professional and practitioners who are interested in sporting research and physical activity and public health. And SPARTAN is led by our world-leading experts, core conveners, Associate Professor Kieron Rooney and Associate Professor Melody Dean. My name is PH Pongsavan. I'm Professor of Public Health. I'm also a member of the network, the SPARTAN Network Leadership Group. And today I have the honor of basically chairing this first seminar with you today. Okay. Just a couple of housekeeping matter. So please mute your mic, but do put into the chat any questions that you might have for our speakers. So the order of presentations would be Lucy Corbett would be speaking first, and we will have some time for some questions. And then we will finish the seminar with a presentation from or by Juliana. So Lucy, are you ready? I'm just going to give you a quick introduction, and then we'll switch screen and get your presentation slides up. While Lucy's doing that, let me just first quickly introduce Lucy Corbet, who is a PhD scholar. Lucy is based in the Prevention Research Collaboration, which is a research group that I'm directing here in the School of Public Health, and we are located in the Charles Perkins Center. Lucy's research is exploring the issues of teachers' well-being and stress, and looking at the issues of teachers' lifestyle and chronic disease risk factors. And today's Lucy's presentation will be discussing the use of physical activity trackers among teachers in New South Wales. Lucy, over to you, and thank you for giving your time for us today.
Thanks, PH. Can everyone see my slides?
Yes, okay.
Okay, great. So, hello, I'm Lucy, and my presentation today will explore the use of physical activity trackers among teachers in New South Wales. So the range of benefits associated with regular physical activity participation and healthy lifestyle behaviour is irrefutable. Teachers' lifestyle behaviours are important both because they lead to positive health outcomes for the teachers themselves, and also because teachers model their behaviour to their students. Despite this, limited research has explored the physical activity levels and lifestyle behaviours of teachers. A Brazilian study found that the physical activity levels among teachers to be low, whereas a French and a German study have found teachers had similar or higher physical activity levels compared to the general population or other occupational groups. But there's not been any research examining the prevalence or extent of physical activity or lifestyle behaviour among Australian teachers. Now, evidence from physical activity and lifestyle behaviour interventions in teachers is limited and low quality, with small sample sizes and methodological issues. Additionally, of the limited number of interventions reported, they're very different interventions, with some focusing on yoga or low intensity physical activity, and other studies using higher intensity exercise such as group sports or gym sessions. So making conclusions from these studies has been difficult. And interestingly, none of these intervention studies used physical activity trackers to increase physical activity among teachers. However, preliminary evidence from these physical activity interventions with teachers suggests that physical activity may improve wellbeing outcomes in teachers, and therefore further exploration into teachers' physical activity and health-related behaviour is very important, as teacher wellbeing is a major issue, especially in Australia at the moment. And there's growing interest in policy and strategy to support teachers' wellbeing. Previous intervention research has shown that wearable activity trackers, such as Fitbits, can increase physical activity participation among various population groups. However, so far to our knowledge, there hasn't been that much specific research into the use of activity trackers or physical activity apps among teachers. So that brings us to our research question. This study aimed to examine the levels of physical activity and lifestyle behaviour among teachers, and describe the demographic characteristics of teachers who use physical activity trackers and physical activity apps, as well as look at the activity tracker and app usage to explore whether activity trackers may be associated with healthy behaviour among teachers. We used a cross-sectional online survey, which was conducted among primary and secondary school teachers in New South Wales. To be eligible to be included in the study, participants had to be currently employed as either a primary or secondary teacher at a school in New South Wales. The survey was open from February till October 2021, and we ended up using 3 methods of recruitment. So firstly, principals of 500 randomly selected schools in New South Wales were emailed information about the study and invited to forward the survey link to teaching staff at the school. However, of those, only 13 principals agreed to participate in the study and distributed the survey to their teaching staff. So we had initially hoped to obtain a random representative sample, but due to the additional pressures faced by schools with COVID, this method obtained a really low response rate. And so we needed to utilize other methods for recruitment as well. So we engaged with professional organisations with ties to New South Wales to meet teachers, and they promoted the survey through internal communication and through social media. We also used targeted Facebook advertising to reach New South Wales teachers who were over 20 years old. Questions were asked about lifestyle behaviour and physical activity technology usage. Physical activity was measured using a previously validated single item physical activity question, with meeting guidelines classified as doing physical activity on 5 or more days per week. Other lifestyle behaviours such as fruit, vegetable and sugar sweetened beverage consumption and smoking status were measured using questions from the New South Wales Population Health Survey. Sleep duration was measured using questions from the Sleep Health Survey of Australian adults, and the National Health and Medical Research Council's recommendations were used to classify lifestyle behaviour as meeting guidelines. Questions from the Irish Sports Monitor 2017 were used to measure the use of physical activity trackers and apps. Information was collected on the use of physical activity apps, including physical activity monitoring or workouts, etc. And the use of physical activity trackers, questions were asked, including whether they'd ever used them and their current tracker usage. Of those who currently used activity trackers, further questions were asked about the length of use, perceived influence of activity trackers on activity levels, and whether they were active prior to using the tracker. And then demographics such as age, sex, and geography were also captured. Healthy behaviours such as meeting physical activity, fruit, vegetable, sugary beverage, and sleep guidelines, as well as not smoking, were coded as 1. These scores were then added together to make a healthy lifestyle index. Those who met 3 of the 6 healthy behaviours were classified as healthy. Then logistic regression identified demographic characteristics associated with physical activity tracker use among teachers, and multiple logistic regression analysis determines the association between activity tracker and app usage and meeting physical activity guidelines or healthy lifestyle index adjusted for age and sex. The survey sample consisted of 1,136 participants. 75% of the sample was female. There was a good spread across age groups, and the majority of teachers came from urban or suburban areas. In terms of teacher characteristics, 64% taught at government schools, 74% have permanent contracts, and 50% were secondary school teachers. Now, I'll just put our sample into context for you. So this is comparable with the general New South Wales teaching population, which is made up of 78% female teachers, 37% are over 50 years, 32% teach at rural or remote areas, 63% teach at government schools, 69% have permanent contracts, and 52% are secondary school teachers. So despite having to use convenient sampling techniques, which reduces the generalizability of results, the similarities between the characteristics in our sample and the general New South Wales teacher population indicate that our sample is fairly typical of teachers in New South Wales. In terms of health characteristics, 62% of teachers had overweight or obesity. Only 23% of teachers met the physical activity guidelines, and 33% of teachers met the guidelines for 3 or more lifestyle behaviours and were classified as healthy. Females were 80% more likely to use activity trackers compared to males. Interestingly, teachers with overweight or obesity were 50% more likely to have used an activity tracker compared with healthy weight teachers. Additionally, younger adults under 35 and those from urban areas were more likely to have ever used an activity tracker. However, women, those aged under 35 and teachers from urban areas were more likely to stop using their activity tracker. This meant that there were no differences in sex, age, or BMI among current users of activity trackers. It also meant that teachers in suburban or rural areas were more likely to use activity trackers compared to their urban colleagues. There were no demographic differences among those who used physical activity apps. When we looked further into the people who had stopped using the activity trackers, we found that of the 217 people who stopped using activity trackers, most, around 70%, stopped using the activity tracker within 1 year, and over 90% stopped using the tracker within 2 years. So this means most people who stopped using the tracker had not become habituated. We also captured the reasons why teachers stopped using their activity tracker. The main reasons are shown in this graph, and the 2 main reasons which you can see are because the activity tracker broke and they couldn't be bothered replacing it, or because they got bored of using the tracker. We also asked those who currently use an activity tracker why they use it, and most of them use it for step counting, measuring heart rate, or non-physical activity related reasons such as phone notifications. Those who use physical activity apps, those who currently use activity trackers, and those who use activity trackers to compare their physical activity with others were more likely to meet physical activity guidelines. Those who used physical activity apps, those who currently use the activity trackers, and those who use an activity tracker for over 2 years were more likely to participate in multiple healthy lifestyle behaviours and be classified as healthy on our health index. As expected, those who were active before using an activity tracker had higher odds of meeting physical activity guidelines and score higher on a range of healthy lifestyle behaviours. Additionally, teachers who perceived their activity tracker to have a major influence on their activity levels were more likely to meet physical activity guidelines compared with those who did not think that the activity tracker influenced their physical activity. So to our knowledge, this was the first study which examined a range of lifestyle behaviours among teachers in Australia. Now, with only 23% of teachers meeting physical activity guidelines and 33% of teachers being classified as healthy on our index, our results show that teachers in New South Wales are a group that need further support to become physically active and develop healthy lifestyle behaviours. Our results show that teachers who use physical activity trackers and apps are more likely to meet physical activity guidelines and have healthy lifestyle behaviour compared with non-users, which provides support for the continued uptake of physical activity trackers. Promoting these devices to middle-aged and older adults, as well as teachers in suburban and rural remote areas, may enhance activity tracker uptake and physical activity levels in these populations. These populations are less likely to stop using the activity tracker once they've started, so targeting these populations may be beneficial for the sustained effect from long-term physical activity tracker usage. So teachers are a population with unique challenges, and little research is currently available on the lifestyle behaviours in this group. Interviews with stakeholders should be conducted to reflect on the results of this survey and provide insight into the potential avenues for acceptable intervention. Physical activity and lifestyle interventions, such as those using physical activity trackers and apps, should be piloted in teachers to generate evidence of effectiveness, both on lifestyle behaviour and on mental wellbeing outcomes, and also to explore issues around acceptability, feasibility, and sustainability of interventions in this population. I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues for their input and Teachers Health Foundation for providing the funding which made this research possible. And then I'd also like to just share some of my conference experience that I had recently. So in May, I had the opportunity to go to the ISBN-PAR conference, which is the International Society for Behavioural Nutrition and Physical Activity. And this year it was held in Phoenix, Arizona. It was my first in-person conference that I've been to for my PhD, and I thought I'd just share some of my experiences with you. So this year, ISBN-PAR used a hybrid conference model with some presentations in each session being delivered online and others being in person. I personally found it much easier to engage with the in-person presentations than the online recordings, and I noticed that most of the people who presented in person got more questions than those who were online. I also found it much easier to block out time to actually attend the conference rather than the online conferences which I'd had experience with before, where I may have had every intention of watching the videos, but then always got distracted by other work tasks. And then in terms of the research that was being presented, I noticed that there was quite a lot of research focusing on body image, social media, both the negatives of social media and how to use social media positively in interventions. And then the use of games and virtual reality to increase physical activity participation was emerging as well. There was quite a lot of research on school-based physical activity and nutrition, but these focused on the students and none seemed to measure teachers' health behaviour. Then also green space, the built environment, and climate change were other large areas of research. So overall, I found ISBN-PAR to be a really nice conference to present at as a PhD student. There were quite a lot of other PhD students there and other EMCRs, and everyone was really friendly and supportive and encouraging. So I really enjoyed my time.
So much, Lucy. Can you please send through your electronic clapping and thanking Lucy for her presentation? Thank you very much, Lucy. Please do stay on. I now like to invite us to welcome our next speaker, who is Dr. Juliana. I'm going to hopefully get this correctly, Juliana. Dr. Juliana De Oliveira, who is a postdoc research fellow at the Institute for Musculoskeletal Health. And thank you, Juliana, for joining us. And Juliana's research is on physical activity intervention for healthy aging and falls prevention. And Juliana's presentation will be discussing the trial intervention that she's been leading, and to share, I guess, the research and findings from that work that she's been engaging in. Juliana, are you ready? Where are you? There you are.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Just going to share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, perfect. So thanks, PH, for the introduction, and thanks for inviting me to present today. So as you said, I'm going to talk about a change trial, coaching for healthy aging. So it's a cluster randomized control trial, and I'm going to present the results. I started this trial during my PhD. So now we finally have the results. So I'm very excited to present today. So we all know someone who had a fall, or perhaps someone who required medical treatment because of a fall. So falls and fall-related injuries among older people are a major health issue. Around 1 in 4 older adults report a fall every year, and 2/3 of fallers will fall again within 6 months. So as showed in this infographic here, 74 older adults die as a result of a fall every day. So it's a big issue. But the good news is that exercise can prevent falls. So there is a strong evidence showing that exercise can prevent falls. It's a systematic review that was led by Kathy Sherrington, and showed that structured exercise prevent falls. And they have great effects if they involve high challenge to balance and high dose. So interventions that included high challenge to balance and more than 3 hours per week of exercise reduced the rate of falls by 39%. However, the role of general physical activity in preventing falls remains unclear. We know that the more older people are out and about, the higher the chance of them to be exposed to falls hazard in the environment. So 2 previous trials of physical activity interventions that successfully increased physical activity levels actually increased falls. So taken together, should physical activity programs include falls prevention components? So that's the question we want to answer with change. So change trial aimed to investigate the impact of a combined physical activity and fall prevention program on falls and physical activity among people aged 60 years and older. We also investigated the impact of our intervention in other secondary outcomes, in other health-related outcomes, such as BMI, mood, quality of life, well-being, and fear of falling. We investigated many outcomes. I'm not going to present all of them today. So change as a cluster trial. So we considered each recruited community as a cluster. We randomized a total of 72 clusters, total of 1,605 participants to either intervention group, which involved a combined physical activity and fall prevention program, or control group, which involved a healthy eating program. We recruited participants from 2 cities in New South Wales, from Sydney and from Orange and surrounds, via established community-based organizations such as Probus, Rotary, and Manchette. We included participants, we included groups that have members predominantly aged 60 years and older, and if they hold meetings or other events at least once every 2 months. And we included participants from these groups they were eligible if they attended these groups or if they met these criteria listed here. So our intervention, the intervention group, which was the physical activity and fall prevention program, involved the participants received a booklet about increasing physical activity and preventing falls. They also received a 2 hours home visit by a trained physiotherapist that included a fall risk assessment using quick screen and a fall prevention advice. They also received in this home visit session a face-to-face health coaching session to jointly plan a fall prevention and physical activity program. During this visit, participants also received an activity tracker, and they set up the activity tracker with the health coach. The other sessions were following the following health coaching sessions were delivered by the phone every fortnight for the first 6 months of the intervention, and every month for the remaining 6 months of the intervention. In total, had a 12-month intervention. So during these phone calls, the health coaches just try to identify any barrier to exercise or any facilitator to exercise. They also assisted the participants to achieve their physical activity goals. And they also asked if the participant had any fall, and if so, they discussed the strategies to prevent future falls. The participants allocated to the healthy eating group, which is the control group, they received also a booklet, but in this case it was about healthy eating. And they also received health coaching sessions, but the health coaching sessions were focused on healthy eating. Was also a 12-month intervention. Participants attended if they wanted or not, was at their discretion. And this service was delivered through the Get Healthy service, which is a free health coaching service from New South Wales Ministry of Health. We had 2 core primary outcomes: physical activity. Just a second. I'm just coughing a little bit because I just had cough. So we had 2 core primary outcomes: physical activity measured with ActGraph at 12 months, and falls measured using the monthly calendar for 12 months. In terms of the results, our participants, they aged 60, on average, 74 years old. They were 70% female, and 30% of our participants, they had previous falls in the past year. The results for counts per minute measured by the ActGraph, we found here, as you can see in this graph, the blue line is the intervention group. So our group, the intervention group, increased counts per minute at 6 months significantly compared to control. However, this increase was not maintained at 12 months. In terms of steps per day, also measured by the ActGraph, we found that the intervention group significantly increased the number of steps taken per day, and this increase was maintained at 12 months. For falls, we found that the control group reported a higher fall rate compared to the intervention group. However, this difference was not statistically significant. We also ran an exploratory subgroup analysis looking at the impact of the intervention on falls by participants' history of falls at baseline. Although it's underpowered, we found this exploratory analysis suggested a fall prevention effect in those who had, we found suggested a fall prevention effect in those who had fallen 2 or more times in the past year, as you can see here in this figure. But we were underpowered. We had only 61 participants. In terms of self-reported walking, was measured using IPAC, we found that participants in the intervention group significantly increased the overall walking, which is planned walking plus incidental walking compared to control group at 3, 6, and 12 months. For the MVPA, so the time they spent in MVPA, we found that the participants in the intervention group, they significantly increased the time in MVPA, 29 minutes per week at 6 months, but not at 12 months, as you can see here. And we dichotomized the participants who met physical activity guidelines versus people who did not meet physical activity guidelines. And you found that 6 months, the intervention group had a higher proportion of people in the intervention group met the physical activity guidelines compared to control. However, this difference was not statistically significant, and they were similar at 12 months. We also identified in terms of secondary outcomes, small but clinically relevant improvements in quality of life at 3, 6, and 12 months. We also found improvements in well-being at 6 months and disability at 12 months. But we did not find any significant between group difference in the other secondary outcomes, such as mood, BMI, fear of falling, and mobility. The participants from Change were also interviewed. So we interviewed 32 participants to understand the impressions of the intervention and ideas for improvement. So this study was led by Abby Haynes, and that described an exploratory factors for why health coaching was beneficial. And this study found that most of the interviewed participants, they reported that the intervention increased physical activity and they embed practice in their day-to-day lives. Before I finish my presentation, I would like to share a video of the Change participants. It's a very inspiring video. It's small. It's not the complete video here, just edited. But this video was featured in the Run Nation Running Festival in Sydney a few years ago. And also have another video that was one of our participants that was featured in 9 News.
My name's Terry Campbell. I'm 91 years of age, actually. I've had a great life, really. I've been active all my life. I've been busy, big family. We've got 7 children.
My name is Dennis McCarran. I'm 70 years young. My outlook on life right at the minute is health. Having gone through a heart situation and my wife's situation with her health, we have a relationship now that's longing and we want to be together forever.
I've always liked to be active, and my whole life has been on my feet. I've got little weights, which are only probably 4 or 5 kilos, they're homemade, but it just gives me a little bit of resistance. And then of course I've got the exercise bike, bit of an antique now, but it works for me. No trying to build yourself up into Mr. Adonis or anything like that.
I make it a point to do between 30 and 40 kilometres a week walking. I actually do Santa Claus for Christmas, and for that you need to be fit. That's another inspiration. I don't want to let people down by not being Santa this year.
I see so many old people who could be so much happier if only they'd get off their tails. It's not hard to do when you don't have to be jumping and running and doing marathons or half marathons and all that. You just got to do that little bit more than you think you're capable of, and it works every time.
You do the steps, right? You do the walking, and when you're losing the calories, so you think, is that really me? But it is. Over the last 3 years, that's me. an hour a day, whether it's broken up in 3 lots of 20 or an hour or 40 minutes or 10 minutes, but get out of the house. Get out of the house.
I feel grotty if I don't do a certain amount of physical exercise a week. Not every day, but a week. You set yourself a sort of a mental plateau, and if you don't achieve that, you feel you've let yourself down.
You can be a sportsman and you can have heroes, but your own self-esteem, be a hero for yourself and inspire others. You just need the mindset.
So many people, when they retire, they want to sit down and be a pain in the bloody neck to everybody else, especially their wives, because they think they've retired. You're only retired from work, you haven't retired from life.
73-year-old Cherie Thompson says there's no guidebook for people like her to navigate the issues that come with ageing.
I think it's really sad that people aren't taught how to be old.
That includes managing the increased risk of falling.
I fell walking into the building, like there's only 3 steps out the front, made a grand entrance and fell in.
For Cherie, simple exercises in the home has worked wonders.
My general sense of well-being is better.
Cherie encourages others to take control of their health.
You are the answer. And the old saying of use it or lose it.
Gabriella Rogers, 9 News.
So in summary, our take-home message is that our combined physical activity and fall prevention program increased physical activity levels among older people. There was a reduction in the rate of falls in the intervention group, but this reduction was not significant. And our intervention was well accepted and safely increased physical activity without increasing falls, as showed in other trials in people aged 60 years and older. Before I finish my presentation, I would like to acknowledge the investigators, especially Ann Tidman, who is the chief investigator of this trial, our research team, and our funding. So thank you so much for watching my presentation, and I'm happy to take any question if you have.
Thank you. 2 o'clock, so we're nearly done. Can you please join me in thanking Juliana and Lucy for their time and giving us such fantastic presentations today. So thank you so much. Before I let you go, I just want to say thank you to everybody for joining our first PA Physical Activity Seminar series. And Isabel just put up a slide here reminding all of us, for those who are yet non-member of SPARTAN, there is a QR code that you can then click and then join the SPARTAN network. And to remind everybody that our next seminar is a symposium for the Helen O'Connor Symposium, and that's scheduled for Wednesday, the 10th of August. So please sign up. That seminar is going to be highlighting women's research in sports, dietetics, and physical activity. So I do look forward to seeing many of you there at that next seminar or next symposium. So in the meantime, thank you so much, everybody, for joining, and thanking Isabel for your fantastic, I guess, support in putting this symposium, this seminar together as well. Thank you, Isabel. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Juliana and Lucy.